to Not Quite Right, the podcast where people explain things to other people, specifically these two people.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Brooke. And we are going to explain a couple of topics to each other that each of us think we understand better than the other person. And we're going to start with me first. My topic that we're going to be talking about today is Doctor Who. I'm going to explain Doctor Who to you, but only after you explain to me what it is that you know about Doctor Who.
Doctor Who. Doctor Who. Doctor Who is British. And Doctor Who is a time travel... Okay, let's back up. Doctor Who is a TV show that used to be on in ye olde Great Britain back in ye olde 1960s, which is what they called it at the time.
Of course.
And I think Doctor Who is a fictional... Well, he's obviously fictional. He's not real. He's a...
Keep going.
Doctor Who is a time-traveling space alien whose job it is to maintain the order of the universe or something and make sure that people don't screw up the timeline. And he, in particular, is a fan of Earth and really seems to enjoy visiting Earth at whatever contemporary period the show happens to be airing at for some reason. So Doctor Who used to run in the old days, and it ran for like 30 years and became I think, the longest running TV show of its time, and then got canceled, and then it got revived back in ye olde early 2000s. at which...
Is that what they called it then?
Yeah, they still do, actually, in some places. In Great Britain,
okay.
I assume.
Okay.
And now they're on their fourth or fifth Doctor. See, I guess the Doctor dies periodically, but not like the actor. They don't actually kill the actor, but the actor quits or whatever, and they replace him with a new one, and he becomes the new Doctor, but it's the same Doctor, and they kind of they figure that out in the plot. And anyway, the current Doctor it's not David Tennant. It's the guy who swears a lot in the Loop. And that's mostly what I know about Doctor Who.
Okay. That's...
Oh, his bad guys are like trash cans who exterminate things. Daleks.
I'm so proud. I'm glad you knew the Daleks, especially because my text tone for so long was a Dalek shouting exterminate.
Oh god, that was so annoying.
It was pretty bad, but it was also really awesome. So I stuck with it for a while. Anyway, you are actually like a lot better than I expected at basic Doctor Who information, but it's definitely not quite right. You are right, Doctor Who did air originally in November of 1963, and the original series lasted until 1989. Throughout that time, it made up 26 seasons, and there were a lot of episodes, 97 of which are actually missing, because in the late 60s and early 70s, the BBC was going through like this culling of all of their archive footage, and they wound up erasing like a lot more than just the 97 episodes, but some of them have been recovered because like overseas TV stations like kept copies. Anyway.
And they're just like, no one's going to care.
Right.
Nobody watches the show. This is the 70s. Like, all of our TV sucks. Nobody's going to want to watch this
They
in the
didn't
future.
know that this was going to become like an amazing cult classic for years and years to come. So anyway, so that was the first run. And during that first run, there were 7 iterations of the Doctor. You said they're on 4 or 5 now. They're actually on 12 now. After it was canceled in 1989, there was a film in 1996, and that's where the 8th Doctor, played by Paul McGann, comes from. And then, like you said, in ye olde 2000s, specifically 2005, they renewed it again and started up with Christopher Eccleston as the 9th iteration of the Doctor. And then since then, there's been 10 was David Tennant, 11 was Matt Smith, and 12 is Peter Capaldi, the sweary guy from In the Loop.
And I believe, I know this, David Tennant is your favorite.
David Tennant is my favorite. So there have been 9 seasons. They call them series. There have been a few spin-offs since the 2005 series, including Torchwood that went from 2006 to 2011, based on Captain Jack Harkness, a very popular character that did a little bit of touring with the Doctor, as well as the Sarah Jane Adventures that lasted from 2007 to 2011, based on a companion from ye olden times. Actually, she was originally, she was the Doctor's companion from 1973 to 1976. And then another would-be spin-off, but they wound up only making one episode and then they called it a Christmas special, was Canine and Company. And Canine is a robot dog who is like friends with Sarah Jane, and they like were on adventures or whatever, but then like that show never took off, and that was back in 81. So anyway, the Doctor is a Time Lord. The Time Lords live on the planet Gallifrey, and they regenerate. That's how they bring in the new actors, is that Time Lords, when they reach to a certain point, run out of energy or like are close to death or any number of reasons that they can wind up regenerating.
He's like the last of his kind, right? Like the other Time Lords no longer exist?
So during the Doctors 9 and 10 and 11, that was what we were supposed to understand, is that he was the last Time Lord. And then you found out at the end of 11's time on the show, the beginning, sort of like towards the beginning of 12's, that Gallifrey actually wasn't destroyed in the Time War. It just like got transported to another place in time and space to continue fighting the Time War with the Daleks. That's like a whole big complicated thing that we're not going to get into all of that complicated stuff today on this episode.
So now there's like a Dr. Y and a Dr. Where. And there's a Dr. No. He's actually James Bond villain.
No. The other Time Lords have different names.
Oh, okay.
He's like the Doctor is the one that Doctor Who follows. The other Time Lords have completely different names. One of the other Time Lords actually is called the Master, and he's sort of like the Moriarty to the Doctor's Sherlock. He's like the archenemy that pops up every now and again.
Why do they call him Doctor Who?
So
what's with that?
He's chosen the name the Doctor for himself. It's like his purpose in his travels is healing. So he calls himself the Doctor. The show is called Doctor Who, and people don't actually call him Doctor Who, but the show's called Doctor Who because every time he introduces himself as the Doctor, people are like, wait, Doctor what? Doctor Who? Like, that's your actual name? And yes, it is. His name is just the Doctor. He does have a real name that nobody's allowed to know except for River Song, who is married to him. He often uses the alias John Smith for when he needs to just have a normal in and out like situation, doesn't want to get noticed or like meet new people.
And he has a police box.
Yeah, so the police box is called the TARDIS, which stands for Time and Relative Dimension in Space. That is his time machine, for lack of a better word. It's what takes him through time and space. His particular TARDIS, so he stole it off Gallifrey in one of the I think it was the first episode. He steals the TARDIS from Gallifrey and he starts traveling in it. And then, so every TARDIS has a camouflage function. And the first time that the Doctor lands on Earth, the camouflage function breaks. And so it's stuck as this blue police box. Other things that are important to mention are that the Doctor often has companions that change. The Doctors don't like the companions. The companions don't like regenerate like the Doctor does. They just are human and mortal, and they eventually go back to their normal lives, or they get stranded in alternate universes. That actually does happen. And the Doctor will eventually pick up a new companion, usually a human, to sort of be the audience surrogate and ask all the questions for us.
Okay, so one question I have about Doctor Who is why?
Why not?
No, so why is this show? Why is it a thing? Why is it all over every hot topic in every mall in America? And why is it popular? What's the deal?
Why is it a cult classic?
Yeah, that.
So, I mean, there's no way to determine what's going to be a cult classic and what isn't. But what makes the Doctor Who so great is not necessarily that it's like this sci-fi show where they travel through time. It's not necessarily about that. Like, it's not about this alien exploring Earth and like learning human things while like trying to maintain the time stream the way that it's supposed to turn out. It's a show about love and friendship and understanding and acceptance and inclusivity. Like, all of these major themes are pushed across in the show that people really connect to. Like, people enjoy Doctor Who not because it's like this awesome, great, budgeted, big show. Like, actually, a lot of viewership has been lost since it became more of that kind of show, that it's like it's being more of like a look at how cool and sci-fi we are. Like, what made it famous and popular and exciting for so many people was that it's this low budget show that explores these great themes. Like, it's great because it didn't know that it was great. So that's just a very brief introduction to Doctor Who. There's so much more. Like, we didn't even talk about the Cybermen. We didn't talk about the Doctor's anatomy. We didn't talk about the War Doctor. We barely even started talking about the Time War. We didn't talk about Rose Tyler or Bad Wolf or The Moment at all. And there's so much crazy stuff that goes into this show. It's so easy to get sucked in if you give yourself the time.
Okay, we'll have to put his anatomy on the Facebook page or something. We have a Facebook page now, by the way. Check that out.
Oh yeah, Facebook.
So that's, yeah, it's not quite right. Facebook/not quite right. And you know how to Google. So that's Doctor Who, I guess.
Right. I mean, I guess the big thing about his anatomy is just that he has two hearts.
Oh, that wasn't what I was thinking of at all. I was anyway. So Doctor Who is a gallivanting time lord from Galileo Gallifrey, Gallimimus, who goes around saving the world and mostly Great Britain.
And it's over 50 years old.
And
now.
it's super old. I pretty much got it now.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm glad.
And we're back for
Part
part
2.
2. The topic that we're going to discuss now is the Nintendo Entertainment System.
You really think you know more than me about the Nintendo Entertainment System?
I think I do, because I've been on Wikipedia for the last, half hour. So what can you tell me about the Nintendo Entertainment System?
This is my childhood we're talking about.
Okay, hit me with it.
Okay, so it was released in 1985. Mario was not the first game, but it was an early game. Some of the most popular games include Zelda and Tetris. There are a bunch of other insanely popular games that I've never got my hands on. But, so the Nintendo Entertainment System was not the first video game console, but it is one of the earliest and most widely marketed in that era. I actually, come to think of it, I'm not sure that it was more popular than the Atari, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Yes, I don't have the numbers, but it was.
Ha! See, I know some things. It is a beautiful box, and oh my gosh, I know more about the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's been a while since I read about it.
Yeah, there's also one literally 4 feet in front of us as we're recording this.
I'm definitely not staring at it now that you've mentioned the Nintendo Entertainment System, aka NES.
The NES. As you would have gotten a wedgie if you'd called it that when you were a kid.
And hang on, one more very important thing that I have to point out about the Nintendo Entertainment System is that one of the common misconceptions is that blowing into the cartridges makes them work better. It feels like it does, but it usually just clogs them up with your spit as well as the dust and grime that's already in there. So you got to clean it off with a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol.
Okay. Well, everything you said is pretty much right.
Yes.
But let's do a deep dive into this because this is important and
Okay.
People need to know. So you're right about the release date, 1985. That was actually the North American release date. It was released in 83 in Japan. And it's the history of the NES is kind of interesting because it came in the wake of the video game crash of 1983 when this is the previous generation that you alluded to, the Atari and a bunch of competing systems, ColecoVision, and there were half a dozen others, early PC games. Basically, the market became flooded with a whole bunch of kind of crap games, and there were all sorts of licensing issues, and the market completely collapsed on video games. which had been going pretty strong since the early to mid 70s. And so for Nintendo to release a new video game system at the time was actually a pretty risky move. And especially when you know a little bit about Nintendo's past. So they actually were a toy manufacturer.
Oh.
Yeah. And they were actually founded in the 1880s.
The 1880s?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So,
I had no idea.
Yeah, they're super old. They've been around forever.
I'm so happy right now.
Yeah. So the Nintendo Entertainment System was released in Japan as the Family Computer, they call it, or the Famicom. Or the Japanese word for Famicom, I don't really know, but that's what it's called here in the States. And in 1985, it was released in the United States as the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was basically responsible for single-handedly reviving the video game industry in the United States. And it wasn't very powerful by modern standards. You could probably guess this. It was pretty weak sauce. It had like 8 kilobits of, or there's like, no, 2 kilobytes of RAM, and like the little cartridges could expand that to like 300 or something like that. It could only show 48 colors, or I think like 25 on the screen at once, and it had a really low resolution. I mean, basically, you could stick a fork in an outlet, and that has more processing power than an NES. You know, you could trap an angry hornet in some Legos and shake it around, and that is technically faster than a Nintendo Entertainment System.
Okay.
But for its time, it was extremely impressive. It could scroll and have, it could move sprites across the screen as opposed to the old Atari, which was completely static. It was a really impressive piece of hardware.
Yeah.
And I didn't get my first one until I don't even know how old I was, maybe I was 6 or 7. So it would have been the early 90s. And it blows my mind that it had already been out for 5 years at the time. So I would say what the Nintendo Entertainment System is best known for is Mario, and that was no accident because it was the first system to actually package in games with it, and Mario Duck Hunt was one of the first ones in the U.S. It actually wasn't released until 1987, so it had been out for quite a while before Mario came out.
Make sure that when you're talking about Mario Duck Hunt, that people know that those are 2 separate games in one cartridge.
2 for 1.
It's the coolest thing.
Which, by the way, aside, do you know how the Duck Hunt controller works? Because it's magic.
No, it's like infrared or something, right?
No. It's actually way more basic.
What is it?
So basically, when you point the little gun at the screen and you depress the trigger, the screen momentarily flashes completely black, but the spot where the duck is flashes a white sensor, like basically a white light, a white dot, and there are little sensors in the gun that can detect that light. So if you're pointing the gun at the right area, because it's kind of down a barrel, it'll know if it registers a hit.
That's pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. I didn't know it could actually see the screen.
Yeah, it can see white light anyway.
Well, yeah, but it can see something on the screen. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was an early NSA device as well. So it actually recorded everything that you did. And
was that on Wikipedia?
It is now. So it ultimately sold about 60 million units, became a big deal, one of the most influential video game systems of all time, introduced a whole generation of children to video games, including ourselves, kind of a big deal. And it's you can't really talk about Nintendo or the NES without bringing up one particular name, which is Shigeru Miyamoto. Are you familiar with this name?
I am familiar with Miyamoto.
He is a legend.
He really is.
He is the Shakespeare of video games.
That is the best way to put it.
Yeah, he is the Sir Francis Drake of video games. Okay, he is the Moses of video games, if you like. He is basically the creator of Donkey Kong and Mario and The Legend of Zelda and Star Fox and pretty much name any major Nintendo property, and he has been involved with it at some level, either in designing or producing. And he was obviously one of the reasons that the NES and Nintendo became the big name that they still are. And he's still with the company. He's still putting stuff out, which is amazing to me. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, the elephant in the room, if you like, you already addressed. It's blowing. Ladies and gentlemen, a public service announcement. You're going to have a Nintendo Entertainment System, and after a couple of years or a couple months, you're going to notice that it starts to freeze up. Or you're going to see color artifacts on your screen. Or you're going to have random reboots or all sorts of problems. The NES was kind of a piece of garbage.
The best, most amazing piece of garbage.
It was an amazing, beautiful
piece.
It was a beautiful piece of garbage. The reason why that happened was it was engineered terribly. Somebody decided. So it's got the little cartridges have these little copper plates on them that establish the electrical connection.
Yeah.
But you stick the cartridge in and you push it down to get it to work, right? So what that does is it puts pressure on the connectors themselves, and it puts a slight amount of pressure, kind of like a lever throughout the cartridge. And over time, that pressure combined with the fact that the copper on the cartridge gets tarnished, that causes the electrical connection to basically stop working. And that caused all sorts of problems. Now, I don't know how this happened because this was in the pre-internet era, but somehow it just became common knowledge amongst every person in the entire world, okay, including remote tribes people who've never had working electricity. Everybody knew that the way to fix a Nintendo Entertainment System that was spazzing out was to blow on it.
Yes, to blow on the cartridge and inside the slot where the cartridge goes in the machine.
Right. You could raise, a feral child, never give them any loving contact or any sort of language or communication skills, and put that child in a room with a spazzing Nintendo Entertainment System, and that child would blow on it to try to get it to working. Try to get it to work.
I believe that.
Yeah. And I could swear to you that it worked when I was a kid. They were also that wasn't the only strategy. Another strategy was to kind of bang it up and down, like push it in, push it out real quick. Blow inside the cartridge. So if you were really lucky, you got your hand on some compressed air and you could kind of put that in there.
Okay, we actually we owned a can of compressed air just for the Nintendo Entertainment System that me and all of my siblings knew how to use. And also sometimes we would hold the can of compressed air upside down and shoot it at each other to freeze each other's legs. That was one of the terrible things that we would do to each other as siblings are known to do. But we had a can of compressed air specifically for fixing the NES.
And according to science, apparently, because I could swear that this was wrong, that all did jack. Not a damn thing.
It felt like it worked.
It was a waste of time, and in fact, probably made it worse. So, I don't know how to verify that. The one in front of us is still functional, and I don't really want to blow on it. But apparently that doesn't work. So, it was a bad design, and I don't even know what to say. It's just so weird to me that was such a commonly held misconception or idea that that's how you fix the thing. And I don't think that's carried on to anything really today, right? Like your computer locks up and you don't just, open up the CD-ROM drive and I can't think of any device that we do that for.
Well, when you open up the CD drive, there's no direct line into the mechanics, right? You're kind of blocked, so there's no way to blow into it that's obvious. Otherwise, people probably would still do that.
I just don't know. Why didn't we apply this principle to other things? Like, oh my god, he's choking!
I can only imagine how obnoxious that's going to be to listen to. I'm so sorry, listeners, on behalf of my husband, who has just destroyed your ear sockets with his nonsense.
So
we get it.
The moral of the story is don't blow on things. Don't blow on electronics. That won't really help.
Keep blowing on hot soup, though. That's fine. Just not too hard, or it'll spray everywhere.
Yeah, that's
just trust me on that.
So I think we've learned a lot today about soup, and also Doctor Who, and that's really all that we wanted to talk about. Do you have any final thoughts about?
I am very pleased that this wound up being a super geek episode without intending it to be.
And basically the most knowledgeable episode, mutually knowledgeable episode, I guess, that we've had.
Yeah, definitely. We both knew a little bit about the other person's topic. I definitely knew more than you did. Because, I knew more about the NES than you did about Doctor Who. What I'm trying to say is, I think I won this episode.
Debatable. We'll put it up on our Facebook page, and people can vote.
Okay. All of our 7 listeners can vote on who won this episode. But it was definitely me.
Okay, well, thanks for listening today. We'll be back in a couple weeks with our next episode, and I hope you've learned a lot. And if you have any any feedback or whatever, let us know. Why don't you go on iTunes and give us a review too? Apparently that's a good way to get podcasts promoted.
Yeah, review us on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also like our Facebook page and give us feedback there if you want.
Okay, bye.
Bye.